Welcome to the Erasmus Plus funded Developing Sport Managers and Leaders Across Europe project video series. This project aims to develop nationally meaningful and European-wide guidelines and policy recommendations on how to plan, deliver and embed employability frameworks in higher education and other forms of education. This in order to develop an effective and sustainable sports management workforce to maximise the economic, health and social impact sport provides across Europe. This video series aims to explore issues related to developing employability with key project stakeholders, expert academics and influential employers in sport and physical activity. In this video, our international panel of young sports management specialists provide an important voice and perspective in discussing young people's career ambitions, the journey from student into professional work, what strategies are working to develop their employability, and what needs to be developed further to enhance their opportunities. Our panellists include Farhan Leach. Farhan is in her final year of studying sports management and business at the University of Brighton in the UK. Farhan is one of just 9 members on a UK-wide youth panel for the Chartered Institute of Sport and Physical Activity Management, CIMSPA, which provides the National Board of Trustees an authentic perspective from student and young professionals' perspectives. Farhan joined the youth panel in July 2019 and is enjoying her time working with the organisation and colleagues and being given opportunities to facilitate her own development and influence the industry further. Harrison Clayton. Harrison has been volunteering in the sports sector since the age of 13 and employed in sport and leisure operations since the age of 16. Harrison is currently in his second year of studies at Cardiff Metropolitan Universities in BSc Sports Management. At a national level, Harrison is currently a Platinum Youth Ambassador for Wales and sits on the Sports Wales board as a representative for young ambassadors in Wales. Harrison has experience in contributing to national steering groups, conferences and expert think tanks in terms of representing the youth voice in sport. Alice Gregory. Alice is currently studying an undergraduate in sports management at Cardiff Metropolitan University, whilst also working part-time as a business support officer for Hockey Wales, the national governing body for field hockey in Wales, where she leads as a diversity champion, promoting equality, diversity and inclusion within the team. Alice has been a young ambassador for the organisation since 2013, working from silver to platinum on Young Ambassador. She's a member of the steering group and youth representative on the board of directors with Welsh Hockey. She's been selected to represent Wales at the European Hockey Federation Youth Festival in Antwerp in 2019. Alice has also been fortunate enough to work with different sports such as football, netball and athletics as a coach and official. Chris Overdwin. Chris has studied a Bachelor of Arts in International Sports Management and Business at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. Over the course of his 4-year bachelor degree, he completed a 3-month internship at the American School of Paris and a 1-year graduation internship in the International Business Development at Villarreal CF in Spain. He's also completed a minor in Finance and Human Resource Management at Coventry University and participated in a number of volunteering roles in grassroots sports. He currently lives in London, where he is studying an MSc, Masters in Sports Business and Leadership at Loughborough University, London. Chris also is a youth board member with the European Association of Sports Management since September 2019. Emma Baker. Emma is currently in her final year studying international sport management at the Hague University of Applied Science. This 3-year bachelor program is a practical orientated program combining theoretical lessons with practical experience such as developing and organising events and volunteering in international sports events. Emma has completed a 10-week internship for a sports agency in Switzerland and has now started a graduation internship at ASICS, the sports retailer. In combination with this internship as a PR intern in the running department, she will be writing a bachelor's thesis. Emma has been a student representative for the European Association of Sports Management since September 2019. Jacob Wickenstahl. As a recent graduate, Jacob's vision is to inspire and make an impact and give back to the sport community. He holds a master's degree in sports sciences, specialising in sports management. Jacob is a sports entrepreneur who has founded the sports jobs platform Sports Idealisten, where he helps more people finding their dream job in sports, and won a prize for young innovators in Sweden. Jacob is a European Association Sport board member, and he has been named one of the top 40 sports tech innovators in Europe.
I've got a series of questions I'd like to ask you, and I'm going to start, Jacob, with you, if that's okay, partly because you're a recent graduate and because of the work you're doing within your organisation. The first question I have for you all to start thinking about is this idea of, in terms of current students, new students coming into programs like sports management, those of you that are currently studying undergrad, postgrad, and Jacob, maybe some of the people that you're working with, what do you think, why are people actually engaged in attending a sports management course? What are the ambitions of our young people at the moment in studying sports management? What are their expectations of the sector? And what do you think, what type of jobs do you think that they want when they graduate? So if I start with you, Jacob, and you maybe have a different perspective.
Yeah, sure. Well, I would like to go back actually when I started myself, and I was in the room with all the other classmates where, you know, the first week, the first days, where people were just walking around with a question mark in their face of like, what are we just, you know, starting to get involved with? And when I asked, my friends today, as they are, what were your thoughts back then? But also when I'm asking and meeting people that are students as of today, when I'm asking them, why do you study sport management and so on? And the most common answer I get is that, I'm interested in sports in general. It's very basic, and it's very like an easy answer to say that I like sports. And then, you know, I have to ask, so why do you like sports in some way? And then some will reply in the way of, I'm still an athlete, so I'm still, you know, participating from that perspective. So I would like to know a little bit more about what's going on the other side of my environment. But then you also have people that have been athletes, or they have, you know, been on the more on the grassroots level, and then they quit participating at an age of 20 years old or something, and they still have that rush or feeling of getting excited when it comes to the sports topics when you're talking about it. And then they think, okay, I've seen on the television or streaming services that you can be a coach, you can, you know, be a manager and so on, and then they feel like intrigued to try it out. But to be honest, also a lot of people in the first semester will start thinking and doubting themselves that can they actually get a job after this? And obviously it's very different depending on the university you study at and so on. But the main thing is that people have some sort of, I would like to phrase it as a passion for sports. So you have some sort of passion, and there's also, you know, it's involved with emotions and an engagement into some part of it. Some are more keen to develop the youth and help them more to be involved in sports in general, but also other ones are more intrigued of being the coach, or it could be being the manager in the end of a sports office and so on. So mostly it's, you know, you just have the feeling and engagement for sports in general. And then there are very few that has already like everything in their mind. I'm going to be this, I'm going to do this. And then I would say, to add up what are they expecting as jobs in the end, is very, I would say it's very, the variety of different roles is very vague. It's more about, I think it's coming back to the way of what you have seen and heard before. It's like the coach and the manager and so on. And I would say there are more opportunities out there. It's more about the awareness. You don't really get exposed to those things before actually trying to explore it yourself.
And I think there's some really interesting points that you've made there, Jacob. I'm going to come to Alison and Harrison now, because actually you're in your second year of study, whereas some of the other young people in this call are in maybe later years or about to graduate. So I'm going to come to you guys in a moment, but you're just really still starting out. Listening to Jacob there, is that passion-based approach, that interest, is that why you've got into this particular program of study? And have you got a clear view of where you're going? And in terms of that career map and that first step in? Is that clear for you at the moment? I don't mind who goes first.
I'll go first. Sorry, Harrison. Yeah, for me, it very much was a passion for sport. You know, I grew up in a sporty family, around a sporty environment. So I always knew from a young age that I would probably end up in the sports industry, where I never really knew until I was probably about 16. And I was part of the Young Ambassador programme with Hockey Wales. And one of the staff members actually asked me the question, you know, where do you want to go with your life? What's your dream goal? And I was actually like, never really thought about the end goal. So I started thinking and, you know, what would I want to do? And then they suggested sports management. And the reason they suggested it, and I think a lot of students probably choose sport management because of it, is it gives you such a wide overview of the sport industry that you can then branch out to wherever you want to go. Because when you apply to university, a lot of people will apply for a degree that they might 3 years later decide that they don't enjoy, whereas sport management gives you the opportunity to gain more information and more knowledge on the sector to then decide where you want to go. So that was another selling point for me, was, you know, it gave me that extra information to then go on to do a master's and specify a bit further then as well. I don't know about you, Harrison.
Yeah, mine's almost similar, but before I didn't think about doing sports management in university. In my head, I always thought, right, I'm doing geography. But at the time, I'm ambassador for sport, and I enjoyed, you know, the networking with people, meeting organizations, doing projects, you know, serving the community and like young. And I really found really rewarding, and like I could see I was developing myself as a person, but also helping my community and developing them through sport and physical activity. And at the same time, I was working in my leisure centre as a lifeguard and swimming teacher. And my manager said, "Oh, why didn't you do sports management?" I did sports management in Cardiff Met. So and like the stuff they were doing and the opportunities were something that's like, oh, that sounds really good, something I get interested in. So I went to the open day and I was sold after it. And I can say, like, throughout my years in university, I've seen the jobs aren't just your sports manager, whether that's in leisure centres, sports clubs, what have you. There's insight, there's managing people, and it just connects throughout sport.
So that career pathway is opening up a little bit more as you've started embedding into the course. Certainly for Farhan and Emma, you're coming towards the end of your studies, and the reality of getting a job or moving on to further study is looming very quickly for you. At the stage of where you're at right now and the peers that you are, is that sense of next steps clear for you and those career aspirations open for you? Farhan, if we start with you.
Sorry, I think I didn't unmute myself properly. I think it's quite hard because at the beginning you think, oh, there's so much, like, I think you're either looking at the opportunities of, say, something working with like grassroots and the charities, and that's kind of the sector you're looking at, or you've got the massive companies and the massive like organizations that you kind of seem like, oh, maybe are they too far off? Like, should I be applying for them? Are they too big? So I think now coming towards the end of it, it's kind of, where do you place yourself where you're going to be situated where you think you can succeed in, and how, if you want to be in the bigger organizations, how do you actually facilitate yourself in getting there? Like, because if you've got the degree and things, like, that's going to help, but obviously they need to see that you're the person that they want to employ. And it's kind of how do you know now, coming to the end of my degree, to get there? Also with COVID, I think things have just been made so much harder for those who are graduating this year, just in terms of any job, and with the sporting industry, nothing really going ahead, like no proper events going ahead. I think that puts me in quite a difficult position about where I go to next, kind of thing.
And do you think you get any advice right now for that?
I think if I put myself forward and I was the one to go forward, then I would definitely get the advice back from people at my university and those that would help me. But as a cohort, those are people that may not be, or may be too scared to put themselves forward and actually go and ask the questions, won't ever find out what they can do. So I think it's almost like it needs to be given, the idea given to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Emma, is that the same for you? Obviously, you're on an internship at the moment. I'm assuming it's virtual at the moment with you.
Yeah, so the internship is virtual, but I think having my program having 2 internships in it, I think it's helped a lot of my cohort, at least, in finding the direction. So now I like talking to my friends from the course, like some of them are thinking their next step will be a master's in something else. For example, I have a friend who wants to do psychology, but she knows she wants to do sports psychology. So she's going to use what she's done with her bachelor, take it to a master, and then combine it after that. But I think, yeah, for me personally, I'm kind of like stuck as well. Like, do I work first or do I apply for a master, but then have the possibility of the master being online, which I don't really want. But I think I have to agree with the point that as you go through for me, 3 years, the career pathway does become a lot clearer. And with the opportunities with the internships and such, I think it does help students find that pathway and learn more about which jobs are available. Not that it's just a manager and agent, but you've got sport for development, sport of, so.
And I think, I've deliberately left Chris to last in this because he is operating at that postgraduate level at the moment, and I'm really interested, Chris, that decision to go from undergraduate into and to move country as well, I'm assuming. Can you just talk us through the thought process of that and what you're hoping to achieve next after your postgraduate study?
Yeah, definitely. So very much like Emma said, throughout my undergraduate, which I did in Amsterdam, I really found what areas of sports management I liked and what I was interested in, what I wanted to get into, doing different. I did 3 internships, through different internships and projects, programs. So I did my final year, a full year internship in Spain, working in professional football. Really enjoyed that, and there I decided that I really want to get into the high performance sport, a commercial position, a leadership position, and partly because of the pandemic, the current pandemic, and the poor job market, I decided to go and do a master's in sports leadership, because being involved in management and professional sports, the mix of the two, just convinced me that this is what I wanted to do, and I'm really enjoying this now. And I think it's been the right step, seeing the pandemic, but also seeing my personal interests. And after this, I hope to get into professional football. Well, potentially, probably just starting at an entry position. But I've been approached already for a sponsorship position at a professional football club, things like that. Commercial activities in professional sports is what likely would be the next step. But like Emma and Farron, I'm also struggling to make that final step. There's options, but it's not, it's all very uncertain. It's not like I can just apply somewhere and I'll find a job. They're all very competitive, and this master's, this 1 year extra studying also gave me that space to kind of further shape and professionally improve myself. But for me, that's also still a step to make.
I think those are really important points, and I think in answering this first question, what I've taken from all of your responses is that the initial step into your choices of study were because of your passions and your interests. Not that was necessarily refined in the early decision, and that you've used your degree journeys to actually explore, and that some of you are still exploring, some of you have taken the opportunities to explore to the point where you've made further study choices. I think that exploration is a really important part of the journey in higher ed. Would you say that as you're exploring and you're looking out, that there are you've mentioned a couple of different industries: professional sport. You've mentioned sport for development, community work. Would you say that those pathways are really clear for you, regardless of what the university is telling you? What is the industry telling you? And do you think that in terms of supporting your exploration and your choices, that's an easy step to make? Even if the jobs are there or not right now, you know how you can make those initial steps and those pathways are clear. So I'll come first to Farhan. You have a national overview and you're thinking about this right now. Do you think those pathways are clear? And if you were to make a choice, right now, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but if you were to make the choice, you know what to do next.
I don't know if I would 100% know how to go about it. I think I'd try and like put myself forward, but then I wouldn't actually know what employers would want to see and the kind of the steps that you take towards it. Like I did a placement last year, but that was obviously online. And at the end of it, they'd offered me a job to start at the end of this year. But if I hadn't been offered that, then I wouldn't have known really kind of where the next steps would take me once finishing my degree.
And Alice, you're obviously in the middle of your studies, but placements is something that you're engaged with. But thinking ahead, is that pathway clear to you? I know you're working for a national governing body at the moment, and you see the sort of day-to-day work. Would you say that that's clear for everybody entering your sport?
I wouldn't say so. I'd say I'm one of the lucky few who has sort of got that clear path, but that's just because of a bit of luck, perhaps you could call it, gaining that job. I've got that little bit of security moving forward. But most people who are on my course or like I know within the industry don't really know where they're going forward. One of the things in our courses, we get asked a lot about professional development, looking at where we want to go, how are we going to get there? And a lot of the time, a lot of people don't actually know where they're going. So they find it really hard then to look at that professional development and really break it down, which I think is probably a problem in a lot of other industries, not just ours as well. But I think that is also one of the downsides of sport management being so open as a course. It's then trying to then bring it back in and find out where you want to go and how.
Yeah, absolutely. Emma, I'm really interested as well. You're working in a sports retail context as an internship at the moment. Would you say outside maybe the core sports industry of provision, the professional sport arena and community sport activities, the sport retail and those peripheral sports industries that we rely on, do you think that they're any better at providing a career pathway?
I don't know if they're necessarily any better. It might be that it's easier, for example, to gain internships with these companies because they are so bigger. They potentially have the budget and the assets available to take on interns. And I think, at least from my opinion, it's easier for a student to go down the commercial pathway because it's more clearer to them, whereas maybe the community sports sector and sport for development, it's focused on as, for example, the commercial side. So I think a lot of the students in my cohort, they are looking at the commercial side of things, whereas we have been introduced to the community sport level and the sport for development side, but we don't have like that clear pathway on how to get in there than we do with the commercial side.
I think that's really important. So I'm going to, Harrison, off that point, I'm going to come to you because the work that you've been doing with Sport Wales, the Sports Council, is very much an arm's length government sponsored agency. So that public sector, public investment, sport for development side, you've been heavily involved in that work. Would you say there are clear pathways there, taking Emma's point?
I say there are clear pathways in terms of marketing and like research and insight, but the actual groundwork you can see is turning towards more commercialization. So the pathways aren't clear and you've got to be prepared to like adapt. But it's really interesting to see how the organization is changing for our commercial world.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Harrison, that obviously you've got the Welsh and the UK context, but that shift in how governments fund and that sport for development context, those transitions are really important. Jacob, from your perspective, I'll come to you last, Chris, again, because of that, the professional sport is a really interesting context. But Jacob, in your sense, you're working with employers. Do you see that they're providing these pathways and it's clear? They're advertising roles, but do you think the career pathways for young students at the moment are necessarily clear and robust enough for them to know how to make those steps?
Well, I think just to start off, what we already heard from the rest of the group here is that there's a point of more focus, and it could be easier to get involved with the commercial side of the sports industry. And I just want to make a point there, because also coming from in my perspective, for example, in my situation, I'm coming from Sweden, where the main focus when it comes to the sports industry is based on the grassroots sports sector. And it's a lot of focus on volunteering. So being professional could be a little bit like, are you really like, is it a little bit, ugly to make money and so on in sports? And also to consider what you just said, the rest of the group here is that I'm thinking where it comes to the more professional companies in sports, or the bigger professional clubs in sports, they usually have more money, they have more resources, which makes the roles that they are looking for are more specific compared to maybe on the grassroots level and so on. So for me, I think this is the main point there when it comes to when you're talking with an employer of more the bigger resources, the bigger clubs, no matter if they're the professional clubs or more like with ASICs and so on, they have more specific, this is what you're gonna do, like this little thing. But then when you go to grassroots clubs, it's more like, we would like to have more people on board. We can't pay them as much, perhaps nothing, maybe just a few bucks here and there. And then when it comes to the task that they will do, is like a little bit unorganized. Usually it's like, okay, we need you to do a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little. So I think when you're talking with both students, but also job seekers in general, it's the search of what can I actually apply from what I know I'm good at. And then also we have, as Alice was mentioning before, when it comes to sport management, it's kind of broad. So in that essence, it's good. However, it's also a little bit unclear what are you actually good at. And I also would say that a lot of job seekers in general, and most students in this case, it's a little bit hard to know what you're actually good at and what you can actually sell in to the organization that you potentially could work for. And then it comes back to which size of the employer are we talking about? Are they more specific or more broadly? And then it's a little bit challenging for both sides in order to say what are we looking for or what are we not looking for, and then vice versa, the ones that are looking for jobs. What should be the main thing? What is my USP, unique selling point in this relationship or the future relationships?
I think some really important points there, Jacob. And and again, coming to Chris, I've come to you last again because the professional sports environment that you're targeting is obviously very attractive to lots of people in terms of working in it. Also very, very competitive to secure roles because of the nature of those organizations. Do you think that professional sports environment have those clear pathways for you? And layered into that question, how much pressure is there in terms of competing and expectations from those employers, knowing that there might be lots of interest?
Yeah, as you say, it's extremely competitive. And once there is an opening, there are so many applications. There's no graduate schemes or trainee programs like you see across many different industries. Such thing just doesn't exist in professional sports. And like you say, once they have an opening, there's hundreds, thousands of people applying to them. So you have to either be very lucky or be extremely competent. And another thing to the professional sports industry is that it's very network based. If you know people, it's much easier to get into an organization. That's how I found my internship. So it's a very closed sort of network, and it's very, very hard to get in. But once you get in, I've also seen it's easier the pathway. Once you get in, it's easier. If you know people within the organization, the club, or if you know people within the league, it's much easier to move up the ranks. But yeah, I've also experienced this very competitive and close sort of structures. But once you're in, it's easier, sort of.
Yeah, I think that networking and that social capacity, the ability to know people and to be exposed to the sector. Once your foot is in the door, then then it allows you to develop, and people can see your skills and you become visible. And I think that's a really important part of the student journey, and maybe some things that our project team needs to think about in terms of, if we're to develop toolkits, how do we help all students have that access and exposure within the industry. I think that leads us nicely on to my next question. The pathways are difficult, and maybe that's something that we should be talking to employers about. But if we're to think about maybe what is working within your experience, or how do we, in terms of the students developing and making those transitions, based on your own experiences and maybe some things that your peers have fed back to you, what strategies and activities are working in terms of giving you confidence or helping you make those transitions, build your networks? From a teaching and learning point of view, or maybe activities that are going on outside the classroom and outside the university. It might be that you're getting development elsewhere. So my fundamental question is, what's working for you right now in terms of this career development, employability, and your helping you with your next steps? Harris, I'm going to come to you first, because you've been heavily involved from that national picture, and you've mentioned the Young Ambassadors program. Is that something that's helped you?
I say that's helped me massively. That's built my network, I'd say, quite a lot. I can rely on people in different organizations and different sectors within sport, where I can ask them for help, or if there is opportunities. For example, last year I did ask if there was opportunities available to expand and get more knowledge in the industry, but obviously due to COVID, that had to be put to stop. But the responses I had were from rugby club and national governing bodies, some private sports organisations. Off my young ambassador journeys, they could see what I've done through my social media as a young ambassador, and they said they were really impressed. So I say, having that networking tool, having been involved with it before, like you said, getting your foot through the door does give you that massive push to expand and grow then.
Alice, you've obviously been through the Young Ambassador program as well, and we've mentioned it a couple of times, but can you just give us a little précis, just to follow up on Harrison there, what the Young Ambassador program has meant to you, and have you had similar experiences?
So I've been fortunate to be part of both the hockey Young Ambassadors and the Sport Wales Young Ambassadors. Both have given me so many amazing opportunities. Harris and I are from two very different parts of Wales, but we've known each other for years because we've been supporting each other through the Sport Wales Young Ambassador programme. And obviously both programmes have been able to combine the whole of Wales. You've made connections, but for me personally, I sort of really wanted to take it as far as I could. So I worked my way up from the bottom level of silver all the way up to platinum. I gained experience on the steering group then I was put onto the youth board, to the youth rep on the Hockey Wales Board of Directors. But I've also been very fortunate to be sent abroad to represent Wales on the Young Ambassador scheme as well. And through that, I have been able to build so many networking opportunities and connections all across Europe. With the ambassador, I would have had none of these opportunities. It simply wouldn't have happened. I'm from a very small rural town in Wales, and those connections just would have been impossible based off my age. Obviously, as you grow up, it does become easier to make connections as you move away from home and go to uni. But the Young Ambassador did just give me so many opportunities from a young age, and I'm still in connections with loads of people that I met at the start of my journey, and I'm still meeting so many new people now, such as yourselves. So it just does. I honestly do think the Young Ambassador programme has been a big asset to Wales.
And Farron, from your experience within your own programme and maybe some of the other work, your links with Simsbury, are you looking at the same sort of activities and experiences that have helped you progress to where you are right now?
Yeah, I think actually a lot of it came from when I started my placement last March. I did it with Active Surrey, and they I was really, really fortunate enough actually that they still let me carry mine on, even though I did it from home. And I could still do it online, because I know a lot of my peers, theirs were completely cancelled and their placement host just didn't get in contact with them. They just didn't even bother. Like, they just said, no, we can't do it anymore. So I think I learnt so much from that. And then there was also the applying for SIMSPA, which Active Surrey also work alongside as well. So then I kind of just, it all just kind of came together, and then it's just expanded my knowledge even further. And then, like, obviously networking and met people through SIMSPA, and then through this and through Active Surrey, and then obviously Mark as a lecturer who works with SIMSPA. So it's all kind of, for me, I've been very fortunate enough, I think, to keep developing those connections for the future.
And would you say that's luck, or would you say that you've put yourself forward and at least asked the questions and been proactive?
Probably a lot of that as well. I think I have done it myself a lot as well, to try and just help me develop personally and professionally as a person. And I can also see that coming through in, like, even my university work and, like, courses, everything's relating. Like, we're discussing a topic at the moment for, like, strategic change in sports business management, and then this is, like, kind of linked in with that, and so it all is linking, which I think is quite nice as well.
Is that helpful, having those real world experiences actually help you with maybe some of the more theoretical aspects of the course?
Oh, for sure, definitely, because then I can link them, like, I know what I'm talking about, and it's just easier. Just have evidence to back up what you want to say is just a lot easier.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important point. Emma and Chris, obviously from the work that you're doing with ESAM, you see lots of different types of good practice, and I know you've got your own ideas. Based on what you're seeing right now, what would you say is some of the best practice you're seeing across Europe in terms of helping students? I know you have lots of ideas, and we'll finish off with maybe what else we should be doing. But based on what you're seeing right now, from that youth board perspective and the work that you're doing, what would you say is the best practice on the ground? We'll start with you, Chris.
I think it is the providing a network for students, providing contacts for students helps a lot. A lot of universities have partnerships, for example, within the industry, or they have contact details of organizations they've worked with previously. I think sort of, providing the structures, the foundations, the possibilities for students through partnerships, through linking up with the industry as a university. And then it is up to the students and their proactivity to make use of those structures. But I think, building that bridge between the university and the industry is the way how students really get the positions they want.
Emma, are you seeing the same?
Yeah, I see it the same. And I also agree with Chris that it's the proactivity of the students themselves that will propel those forward that really want to do it. And then those who don't take those active steps, well, they might get left behind a little bit. And I think from my side, from what my university did, they put a lot of emphasis in the first year on creating a LinkedIn account, on building that network. And then our teachers also have these connections where they can bring in industry professionals. And then they've also encouraged us to link up with them afterwards and build that network, because it is so vitally important in the sports industry.
And is that, from that comment, is that always through a placement, or is there other work that your university's done with employers?
In what sense? Like
is it just internships where your university has made those partnerships, or are they been involved in other parts of your curriculum and your learning?
Well, I think for my university itself, it's a little different because our program is only in its third year. So there are not necessarily like connections or partnerships, but the teachers have their individual connections where they can set up some internships. But I think it's also something that the university is considering, is building these partnerships and potentially creating like a internship database where we know ISPM students have been accepted. It's a connection we have to these industries and these companies, and then they can use that when new students apply and they look for their internships as well.
That's fab. Jacob,
just to add to that, if I can.
Yeah, of course.
Within my undergrad and graduate course, it's not just been internships, but also guest speakers, visits to companies or field trips to different organizations, and then speaking to people and making that bridge, building that bridge, saying, hey, I'm a student of this university. We visited here and there. It's also in the small things like a guest speaker that you're building the bridge between the academics and the industry. So it's partnerships and small initiatives too.
And Jacob, I've left you to last on this one because obviously you've recently graduated, but you're working with employers. What best practices do you see from employers in working with universities? Are there some clear examples for you? Is he frozen?
Well, I mean, first, just like a little bit to what it sounds like what the rest of the group are saying when it comes to getting the connections and so on. It feels like there's a need with universities to show the way, or at least a little bit what Chris was just mentioning with the bridge, open up the bridge to the other side, so to say, with the employer side of it. And then their students have to take on the next step of like, okay, we have the connection now, it's okay to talk. I just want to add up with that one is that what I can see in when I'm talking and hearing and so on, it feels like that's one great way for students to know it's okay to contact. But I also would like to add up and say that we also need to help push the students to do it themselves and not asking or giving the approval for a university to say you can talk with these people. I also think we need to push more of the confidence of just doing it yourself. And I think it was mentioned earlier in the session of like being there to have the question asked. So we also need to make sure that even though if you're doing your first year or the last year, whatever, you should still be okay to reach out. But then sure, in many cases, it feels like the employers, they just want to have the good and the best part of the cake, so to say. And then it's easier for them to like, okay, if a university reach out, well, and you're looking for an internship and so on, who are the best students and so on, because they would like to have the best. And there's some laziness in part of it, but also in one way, depend on the employer. Are we talking the grassroots level or the professional and so on? Then there are more time, less time, and what other resources they are from the hiring managers. So for me, I would like to just drop in this case of saying we need to put more focus for the students to make sure that they are confident to reach out, no matter if someone has helped you to open up the door. I think we also need to make them to knock on the door themselves. And then from the employer side, it comes a little bit to the context of how big and small they are, what are their resources. I think more smaller organizations should be more proactive themselves to reach out to universities and say, feel free to contact us. We can't promise anything, but we always need help. But then the question for them comes, who will be responsible to take care of that student to help out in those ways? So we have, the different, it's unbalanced forms here when it comes to who can help who, but also I just want to, put into the thing of daring to ask people.
Do you think with some of the employers that you work with, do you think that there are employers out there that would more than happy to help and to contribute, even if they couldn't offer an internship? Do you think they would be willing to support some of the ideas that Chris has mentioned, guest lectures or visits and interesting case studies for work? Do you think there are employers out there are supportive of that way of working?
Yeah, some will definitely ask for what's the purpose for themselves, why they should do it. But I know for sure there's tons of people that are very, they appreciate the opportunities that arise. And there are many people from the sports industry that usually want to give back. So they've been in the same position back themselves. So usually they are keen to, do a short talk. And it's now in these days, especially from 2020, I would say it's easier than ever to participate in those talks and lectures, because usually you can just do it from your home. But then then you're losing kind of the networking part that I think it's kind of like being the core message when the rest of the group are talking about the networking lectures and so on. We're losing out in the digital space of then you want to have the small talk after that talk has been done. You know, you want to go and, you know, knock on the shoulder and say like, hi, that was a good speech. Can I ask you a few questions? Those are the things that we are lacking now in the digital space.
Okay, I think that's really, especially that digital space is really interesting for me, and how we open up the network beyond maybe the immediate local environment or national environment. I think this is a testament to how we can work digitally and have an international group of students and young people working together and sharing ideas. What's clear to me is that there's commonality regardless of the nationality, and I think that's an important message for the project team to consider. So I've got two more questions for you to finish the session. One is quite specific about how we may engage other young people in this ongoing conversation as the project continues to develop. I'll leave that to the end. The interesting question I have for you now, given everything we've discussed today, if resources were not an issue and I had a magic wand, what do you think that universities and employers should be doing? What's missing? If you had a wish list of things that were put in place for students, yourself and your peers, to help them with the career development and their progression into work, what would your wish list contain? I'm going to let you have a little think about that, and I'm going to come to Farhan first. If you had a wish list for your course or for your next steps, what would be on that? What would you want to see more of to help you?
I think maybe like workshops organised like of the different career paths that we could take, because they could be arranged virtually. And like Chris said earlier about guest speakers and things, we obviously haven't really had that this year, or being able to go and do like events or go and visit places that we were supposed to. So maybe some kind of workshops throughout the year about the different employment opportunities and how you can develop. I know we had our placement, and a lot of like the course should have helped you to develop personally and professionally on that, but I think maybe just in our final year to give us a bit more direction of how to apply for jobs, what people want to see, where they want to go, maybe even help with a bit of networking if there are like guest speakers at these workshops that we might be able to get in contact with, kind of thing. Because at the moment, obviously, I mean, it's no one's fault obviously that we're experiencing COVID, but I think it's going to be quite tough for people to know how to exit the education route properly. And
do you think that universities have got a role after you graduate anyway, regardless of COVID? Do you think that you should be getting support from your base university and your employers in those next steps, even when you graduate?
I think I'd like to think so, because especially when my placement host and the uni had such like they had so much contact with each other throughout the time that I was there, that it would be nice to know that there was still that support gained from the university post graduation and things. So I think that also really helped me and encouraged me to work harder on my placement, knowing that there was such a strong rapport between the university and my placement host.
I think there's some really lovely ideas there on how we support. Do you think that in your instance, does it have to be the course? Could it be the student union? Could it be SIMSPA? Could it be other organisations that actually take some responsibility of supporting these workshops? Yeah,
for sure, definitely. Like I think anyone that's actually putting out an interest and wants to help the younger generation succeed and support them, I think would be welcomed for any student, really. Well, the ones and the ones that are going to be proactive, like said earlier, I think it would be highly appreciated by a lot of people.
Okay, I think that's a really important message. That I think if we're going to develop a toolkit that helps maybe shape some of the thinking on that. Alison and Harrison, you know, you're on a program right now, and you're getting employability because we're pushing it at you. But what can the course or the university do more of in terms of supporting your progression, plus the organisations that you're working with? How are they helping, or how could they help you more? Harrison, can I come to you first?
Yeah, so I think, well, obviously in Cardiff Met, we have something called an industry week, where industry partners and organisations come in, they give us charts, discussions and tasks. I mean, sometimes then we go to visit places. So last year we went to Sport Wales, but obviously this year with COVID, it's been online. What I like more of those opportunities, it was just stay for a week. It's very like time. You've got that many opportunities to engage with the person delivering it, to have those one-on-one conversations. But those opportunities still give you insight into, oh yeah, I might want to go down that career path, or I've learned this from here. So I think having those opportunities from universities, but just having them a lot more. And then obviously with organisations like Sport Wales and other sports organisations, I think it's them opening up, having that contact.
And do you think that should be a balanced program? Should we be looking at very early on in the course having those guest speakers from professional and community sports? You get to see that balance. Should that be earlier in the course, or do you think that should be a bit more specialised?
I think early on, because it gives you a better idea, and like it makes your life easier to say, oh yeah, I might want to go down this career path early on, but yet you can still change your mind, which is I think is a good thing to have.
Alice, from your perspective, is that the same, or is there some specifics that you think that maybe employers should also be aware of, because you're obviously heavily involved with your organisation?
Yeah, I think I agree with Harrison on that front. We're quite fortunate with Cardiff Met. Obviously, they're very proactive in ensuring we have the right skills and the right knowledge and having those network opportunities available to us. But I think based off my knowledge of industry and other universities in the UK, one thing that they could provide us more with is information on specific courses, like extra training we could take on for like continued professional development. Obviously, any form of training and qualifications are beneficial, but I don't really think that it's beneficial if in the long term you're going to go to an interview and you've done all this extra training, spent all this hours paying for extra courses, and then they're not actually recognised or they're not approved. And I think that is one thing universities and employers could probably do, is give more support around that. And another thing that I would probably suggest is a lot of programs will do mentoring schemes. And I know a lot of universities will have their students mentored. But I think a lot of people forget that eventually when they go into the working industry, that then they will have to mentor. So I think one thing that they could do in university is probably give students the opportunity to mentor others. I know that USW in Wales is quite good with their mentor scheme. Their students go out and mentor people within sixth forms in the colleges in the local area. And the Football Association of Wales, they also have a very good mentor scheme currently as well.
I think that's a really interesting point, Alice. And I think mentoring, especially for you as managers, it will be part of your skill set and your development, especially when you start managing people, that mentorship. So that ability to have a go and I think somebody said it earlier on, pay it forward or pay back into that, I think is an important idea and something that can definitely be layered into some of the programs. Emma and Chris, and if I can start with you, Emma, I know you've got lots of ideas and we've discussed this in the past in terms of how you work with organisations like ESAM, and we've done some student sessions last autumn, and there were lots of ideas and feedback from those sessions. Are there things that you think that both from an ESAM point of view and maybe the university point of view we could be doing more of as well? So if I start with you, Emma.
Yeah, I think the sessions that we did, the one specifically on the different pathways, was really well received. So I think it's been brought up before that having this clarity on which pathways there are and how to go on those paths, I think that's something ESAM can do, because at least from my point of view, ESAM is a lot right now focused on the academic pathway. But of course, ESAM is supposed to be that bridge between academic and the actual industry. So I think kind of bridging those topics together is something that should be focused on. And okay, from my side, I'm doing a course that's applied science. So of course, we focus more in the industry, but I think maybe bringing awareness to the research side of things that we don't really cover too much would be something as well. Yeah. And then like for me, just personally, what I've like seen like that employers could be doing, I think I've been looking at a lot of course like job descriptions right now, and there's a lot of requirements on it, but I think maybe having like that set list, like if you're looking at going into marketing or communications, these are some skills you should have. Like, of course, you can go through all the different job adverts, but of course, each job will have something different. But you have that general like description of skills that are good to have, and maybe some additional skills and course links that you could do before you apply for the job, so you're more suited for the job. I think that will be quite helpful.
And do you think that outside of your core curriculum and your modules that you're studying, if you are interested in a certain area, that maybe what Alice mentioned, that extra training, those workshops, maybe should that be a bit more formalized to help you with those transitions?
Yeah, so I've done some of those like extra courses, but that's on my own initiative. But I think if the university were to push it more, I think that would be helpful. Like, I applied for a job during the summer, and they came back saying, if you had Photoshop skills in that, you would have been taken, but I didn't have those skills. And those are skills that, at least for my university course, they're not really taught. So if the university can offer or provide some resources where we can do those courses, I think that would be really helpful.
Okay, Chris, is it the same for you? Obviously, the ESOM perspective and the workshops that you were involved with. Are there other ideas that you've been discussing that you'd like to see? If I had unlimited resources, what would you like to see ESOM doing and others doing?
Coming back to the magic wand, to me, ideally, that would just be a sort of graduate scheme or trainee program for graduates into sports. But obviously, universities cannot just make that happen. But what Loughborough does, for example, Loughborough London, they have a separate. It's called Future Space, which is across different faculties in the industry. It's an employability training section. So they give employability workshops, CV training, and all that kind of stuff, skill trainings. But they also link up with the industry. They have several partners that are used for modules of different programs. For example, I have a collaborative module now where I can choose between 5 employers in London, West Ham United, Ticketmaster, UK Sport, and they all have a different case studies which you work on with the group. And so that is the university providing a sort of industry link to students. So that is something that ESM, but in industry-wide, sports management-wide, I would love to see happening more links with the industry, but also what Loughborough does with a separate sort of dedicated space for employability. Universities and ESM doing that, for example, would also help a lot.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And Jacob, if I can finish with you, there's some really, really good ideas there. I think a strong core messages coming through. I'm also interested, because you work in digital platforms through your business as well. Do you think we're maximizing I know COVID has forced us into the digital space a bit more, but do you think we're maximizing the use of digital platforms at the moment? Sometimes I'd love to be able to take my students to Tokyo for the Olympics, and that might not be feasible in terms of getting them there, but digitally we can bring it a bit closer and make it interesting. So do you think there are ideas we can explore in that digital format?
Yeah, I would like to say from the last 3 years or something like that, the technology within sports industry, but also technology in general has, been improved, and it still gets improved for every day, it feels like. So I know you and I have had talks before about having like a virtual reality experience where you could more or less put on some glasses and then you could digital, virtual reality, be there wherever you would like to be at. And when I'm thinking about a little bit about having all resources possible, and also actually I wrote down some stuff on here, and it touches into a little bit what Chris just mentioned, and about having those practical issues or challenges that you can actually work on. Then if we have all resources possible, then in that case we should have an open platform. And now I'm just saying open. It could be in one country, but have an open platform. The sports industry, they just pop up their different challenges. They are open with everything. It's very transparent in this case. And then students or either students or whatever people that are interested into the sports industry, then they can try to suggest some solutions to the different challenges and problems. And then if the sports industry people are curious to know more about it, then they just book a call, or the students could also book a call themselves with the different people to see if they could have a 10 minutes call just to start up the conversation. And then a little bit into what Chris mentioning, but also taking the VR and glasses experience, being just in the first days of your sport management career, like having the opportunity to watch videos or listening to audio, or having the VR experience of seeing all the different sort of roles that exist, everything from the webinar that we had with DSMLE last year of like, this is one level of the sports industry, and then you have another one and another one and so on. Having the opportunity to kind of having the buffet yourself in the beginning of, okay, I would like to explore what it doesn't mean when it comes to the national side of sports industry and the global and the local. And I would say if you have that possibilities, then you as a person, you will at least have some more eyes open of what actually exists out there. And then it could be very helpful for you to know where you should go, but also it's a good benefit of knowing, okay, that sounds more interesting. So now I can actually look into individual courses online. I can read books and all that on my own pace and do it on my own side of, university studies. So a mix of having everything just ahead of you, but also with the technology, I would say VR is one way where we should be able to explore a little bit more of giving some scenes of the reality of the sport industry.
I think those are really important points, and maybe we should be challenging our largest sports organisations to build learning as a legacy to some of the events that we're seeing. So, should learning legacies be built into the Olympic Games and the FIFA World Cup, and should they be looking to capture some of that type of content to make courses more interesting and to give case studies? I think you've made, as a group today, you've made a really strong case that having the connections with the industry, authentic learning and interesting case studies, access to people is an important part of your journey. And I think the employers really need to sit back and reflect on that. We'll make sure that our employer group listens to this session. And I think it would be important to get their view on how they may be able to step up and influence within their resources as well. So I think that multimedia environment, 21st century learning is an important point to finish on there. Again, thank you ever so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate your honest answers and your opinions. It's been really powerful exercise from me. And is there any final comments any of you would like to say before we leave the session? Jacob?
Yeah. No, so I think I just thought of it now for like 10 to 15 minutes from trying to summarize everything. And I think for all the employers, it's kind of crucial to, and also universities, to think of feedback as a key word, because I think that's what we all talking about the whole time here. Like, how can students getting the support in some way and networking, all of that. It's also, the path of where am I going? Where should I go? Where shouldn't I go? And so on. And if you don't getting any message of you going on the right way or the wrong way and so on, then I think this is a little bit what we are talking about, getting the feedback either of someone telling you how the things are, and then you getting the feedback, okay, that's how it works over there, but also as a student of, where am I good at, what I'm not good at, and so on. If no one tells you, then you're just going to go. And this comes as well with internships. If you're doing an internship for several months, can you give at least some feedback in the beginning so you know you're on the right pathway or not? But also in general, what's the feedback? What did I do well? What should I improve? And I think this comes well in hand with the whole project, and also in the matter of employability for students, and no matter if we're talking sports industry or not, but feedback of just knowing if you're doing the right thing or not. So in COVID terms, digital space. We need to keep up and improve the communication even more than usual. So in order not to be alone, feel insecure and so on, all the students or job seekers in general need someone backing them up in some way. So feedback would, I say, be the conclusion of everything.